Hey students, I hope you're having a good Friday. Today is the best and worst day in all of history as we celebrate the fact that 2,000 years ago, Jesus was hanging on a cross. He was beaten, he was broken, crushed, humiliated, spit on, all because of my sin and your sin. But we know that Sunday's coming. He's going to go into a grave when they take him off of that cross. But Sunday is coming. He's going to rise up in victory. He's going to come back from the dead as only the God of creation can, showing who he is, showing that the grave is beaten. And we celebrate that today. We celebrate Good Friday today. And I hope that you're taking some time to ponder that. But we also today, because it is Friday, we want to go through our Friday recap like we've done the last few weeks since we've been in quarantine. And we want to just talk about the things that we've been reading. And so this week we kind of got a little bit sporadic. And I also want to start with saying that at the end of the video, we're going to have 2 testimonies from some students that I'm really excited about, man. If you're not, if I can't motivate you and I can't get you excited about reading the Bible, I just hope and pray that some of the students and what they're reading will get you excited, because man, they're getting some good stuff out of the reading. And so I hope that that's a motivation for you. So stick around to the end of the video and you'll get to hear from a couple of the students and our student leadership. But we skipped around this week. We read a good bit of different things. We finished off the book of Exodus with Exodus 40, and then we read Leviticus 8 and 9, 16 and 17, 19 and 23, and 26. And then tomorrow we will read Numbers 11 and 12. We're not going to talk about that today because I want you guys to read tomorrow. But today we're going to talk about what we've already read this week. And we started off with Exodus 40. We saw the tabernacle being built. We saw, that coming to fruition. And this was God saying, I'm going to tabernacle with you. I'm going to be among you. I'm going to be with, my people. And so this was an amazing time, but what really stood out to me was the number of times that it said that Moses did all that God told him to do. We see obedience from Moses. And then we also see the Israelites, where it says throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the people of Israel would set out. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out till the day that it was taken up. We see obedience from the Israelites, right? And so we started out in Exodus with seeing Moses, who was hesitant to do what God told him to do because he thought that he was incapable, thought that he was incompetent, didn't think he had what he needed to do what God told him to do. And we saw the Israelites who throughout their time in Exodus were just constantly, God, we wish we could go back to Egypt. We wish we could go back to being slaves. Or they were, building they were building idols, golden calves, like the crazy arc of the Israelites. But at the end of Exodus, we see them come full circle to being fully devoted to God, following him. And the same way with Moses. And that's not going to stay that way. There's going to continue to be issues. But at this moment, we see the bookends, where we see where we started and where we finished. And it's in obedience is where they finished at. So then we jumped into Leviticus. Leviticus 8 and 9. So if we'll flip over there real quick. We basically see, we see the tabernacle being built at the end of Exodus. And then we see God setting all of these different things up. So chapter 8 is the consecration of Aaron and his sons as priests. This is God just saying, hey, these are the priests that are gonna, they're gonna be the ones who are doing some of the sacrifices. They're gonna be the ones who are interceding for you guys. They're the ones who are able to go into my presence. So God's establishing who the priest will be in chapter 8, and he's ordaining them as priests. And then the first service in the tabernacle happens in chapter 9, and it's a service of offering that Aaron gives up. So then we've got chapter 16, which is Aaron had 2 sons that were killed. They were disobedient to what God had told them to do. And so in chapter 16, God tells Moses, hey, we're going to set down some ground rules of how this is going to go. We've got the things that I want you to obey in order for the priest to come into my presence. Here's when they can do it. Here's how they can do it. So we see that in chapter 16. And then chapter 17, we see the way that the animals are supposed to be handled whenever they are offered up to the Lord. So we've got God giving them instructions on how to make these different offerings and these different sacrifices. And then we skip, I think we went to chapter 19 after that. We see God telling the people of Israel to be holy. Man, in verses 1 and 2, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And then he gives them instructions on how to do that. So he tells them, number one, you got to start by loving your neighbor. You got to start by loving people. And the way that he tells them to do that was awesome, right? He doesn't, he tells them to be practical. So whenever they're gathering food in their fields and gathering up the harvest, he says, look, if you drop things on the ground, leave it and let it be there for the people to come by and scavenge, right? The people that don't have anything, let them come by and get the food that you drop. Don't go all the way to the edges of your field and reap at the edges of the field. Leave the edges, and people who don't have anything, they can come by and get that food. They can get, those crops. And so he establishes how to love people by not being stingy. Don't be greedy. Don't be selfish. Help a brother out, right? And then we see, as we continue on in chapter 19, he just gives them the ground rules. He gives them the commandments. Here's how you should live. Here's what your life should look like. Here's how you should live a life that is set apart. And he gives them a list of do's and don'ts and tells them how their lives should look. And then we jump to chapter 23. So let's jump over to chapter 23. And we see the feasts that the Lord establishes. He sets up a calendar for the people of Israel. And these feasts are times where they're supposed to remember things that God's done. They're supposed to look towards the future, that they're supposed to remain dedicated. All these different things that are going on, dedication of their lives, and all these different things that God wants them to do in these moments in their calendar throughout the year. And so we've got the feasts in chapter 23, and then in Leviticus 26, the last chapter that we've read so far this week is, a crazy chapter. God tells the people of Israel, look, if you're obedient to me, here's the blessings that you're going to receive. Here's what I'm going to do for you. But if you're disobedient if you're disobedient to me, there will be consequences. There will be punishment. And he lists out basically like a 5-tier plan of how this punishment will go. Each step of, all right, if you're disobedient, then here's what I'm going to do. If you continue to be disobedient, here's what I'm going to do. And it progressively gets worse. And we see the wrath of God being poured out on the people that are disobedient to him. And it reminds us that God takes sin so seriously. Sin is not just the flippant thing that we just casually do and it's no big deal. Sin is something that we should be broken by, that we should be hurt by, because it's something that God, He hates that much that He placed it on His Son Jesus and destroyed it on the cross. He poured out His wrath on Jesus and on our sin to destroy it. That's the hatred that God has of sin. That's how much God dislikes sin. And I said this last night on the LTC Hangout. As I'm going through and I'm reading about all the different sacrifices and the offerings, it just reminds me that sin is not a flippant thing. It's not a casual thing. It is a big deal. And these sacrifices and these offerings, I think, were a reminder to Israel that every time that they sinned, there was something they had to do to be forgiven of that sin, to be made right with God. And I think they were constantly reminded, sin is not casual. Sin is a big deal. And so in a world today where we see people that don't take sin seriously, we need to be people as people of God that take sin seriously. So I just want to encourage you with that. And like I said, we're going to close out with a couple videos from some of our students, and I hope these are an encouragement to you. Tell me, hey, what have you learned as you've been reading the Bible? This is a point in the Word where a lot of people typically jump off during their Bible reading plan. So I'm praying that you guys have stuck with us, that you're still going strong, and I look forward to hearing about what God's been speaking to you.
Hey guys, so I just wanted to share what the Word has spoken to me this week. So the main thing that stood out to me was Leviticus chapter 8, verse 23. And this is when they're sacrificing the ram for the ordination of Aaron and his sons to make them priests. So it says, Moses took some of its blood and put it on the lobe of Aaron's right ear, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. So we actually talked about this in the high school girls small group the other night, and at first we were like, oh, like that's kind of weird, they're just putting like animal blood on people. But then, like, the more we thought about it, we realized that it must have some significance, because God doesn't do anything without a purpose. So the next day, Miss Heidi Aber actually sent us an article, and it broke it down for us. So it basically said that the priests were supposed to live set apart from the people. So when they put the blood on their right ear, it symbolized hearing differently. And then when they put it on their thumb, it symbolized working differently. And when they put it on their toe, it symbolized walking differently. And then it was also on their right side, because the right side was considered superior. So it symbolized only giving your best to God. And then another way to break it down, which is like what the note in my Bible talks about for this part, it basically talks about how it goes from the ear to the thumb to the toe. So it goes from like head to toe. So it symbolizes giving your full devotion to God. So I think, like, for us, that really means to not get into the word and then like forget about it until like the next day in your next quiet time, but to really meditate on the word and let it get into you and let it affect how you live. So it's like James 1:22 says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves, do what it says. So I think we need to really be letting the word affect like every aspect of our life, and ultimately be doing everything for the glory of God. And I think that ultimately means loving God and loving the people he's put in our lives. So I think now is a really good time to kind of like self-reflect and see how we've been living, like in school and sports and clubs, and see if that has been glorifying God, and see if we have been really loving the people he's placed in our lives. Because I think a lot of times we see people as their beliefs and opinions and their flaws, instead of just seeing them as God's creation. And I think if we start with the people we're with now and learn to love them, then it'll become habit by the time we get to see everyone else again. And I think now is also a really good time to be sharing the gospel with unsaved family members, or just being with your family and helping each other grow in your walk with Christ. And that way God could change us completely, and we could reach other people. When we get to see everyone else again, we could reach them in all new ways.
Hello everyone, if you don't remember me from a couple weeks ago, my name's Tyler. I'm from the student leadership team at LTC, and I'm just here to share once again what God spoke to me through the Word this week. I actually just got done reading over today's reading, which was, it's Thursday, so it's Leviticus 19 and 23, and it's been very difficult trying to figure out what God's been speaking to me about, like these past couple days, because it's all been like sacrifices and things like that. And of course you can get things out of that. I just haven't personally gotten anything out of that. But in today's reading, it's not like something really new to me. It's just a refresher for me. And then we all need refreshers, especially with like what's going on today. But what the whole thing is God's love. That's what I'm hearing a lot of right now. You know, God, as we saw, like I don't remember if it's from last week's reading, but whenever he brought the Israelites out of Egypt, and he showed a lot of grace for them, and Moses helped them out a lot through it all, because the golden calf, God showed mercy on them, everything like that, and through it all he showed love, and he shows a bunch of love, and he calls us to show love. Like here in Leviticus 19:18, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as you yourself. I am the Lord. So we're just called to love on each other, and it's very difficult to do that these days with everything that's just going on. It could be politically, how your stances are and someone else's are, and you just you just can hate someone for that type of stuff. But you just need to start loving on others. And I have another piece of verse right here. This is also from Leviticus 19, and it is verse 34. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. I mean, we're not just supposed to love on people that we know, our friends, our family. We're called to love on everyone. You know, the person across the street that you've never talked to. And just everyone. Because that's how you show God's glory, is through through loving others. And that's what I learned this week. And I know personally that during this quarantine time with COVID-19, I need to love on my little brothers more and my family more. And just all the people around me. That's it.